presentation on lit reviews, and I'll just give a little information about each of them. Kate Parker Karst is the Assistant Director of the Prevention Research Center, and she also serves as Director of Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities in New Orleans. She received her MPH from here in the Epi Department in 2006, and is also currently enrolled as a doctoral student in the Global Community Health and Behavioral Sciences Department. And Philip Walker has his Master's in Library and Information Science, and was hired as a reference librarian at the Matis Library since 2005. And he is also currently working on a Master's of Science in Health Informatics at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and is a member of the American Society for Information Science and Technology and the American Medical Informatics Association. So we're really happy to have them, and we hope you guys get some good information. And if there are some handouts and evaluation forms, and please sign in before leaving if you haven't done so.
Great. Thanks, Sugar Pay. Philip and I are here to talk to you about how to do a good literature review. Tell me, raise your hand if you've done a literature review before. Okay, so maybe about a third of you. Raise your hand if you've been recently asked to do one, or if you have an assignment coming up. Okay, good. So this will be really pertinent for y'all. Literature reviews can be kind of daunting, and I think when I was in this program, no one taught me how to do this. I kind of like muddled through it, and I thought there's got to be an easier way to do this. You know, I would just get these assignments in class, and I didn't really know how I was supposed to begin. You know, you start looking on Google or PubMed or whatever, and you get a ton of articles, and how do you organize all this information? So there's a lot going on. So some of you might be writing a paper for your class, or you're trying to make a presentation, maybe you're going to APHA, or you're getting started on your dissertation and you want to really know a lot more about your topic area, or you have a research proposal idea. So if these are some of the areas in which you're going to need a literature review to get this going, the worst thing is to stand up in front of a group of people and profess to be an expert in something, and then find out that you really don't know what you're talking about because someone else is more up-to-date on it than you. So you really want to become an expert in something that you're interested in, and the best way to do that is to be proficient in all the literature. So here's some assignment that I received when I was, before my comps as a doctoral student. I had to conduct a literature review of the built environment, which is really a large area of knowledge right now. I mean, there's all sorts of indicators and all sorts of studies and new interventions coming out all the time. So this was about finding specific features of the built environment that had to do with physical activity, walking, biking, active play for children. And part of the assignment is that I had to review primary research, meta-analysis, and look at just the outcome of physical activity, and really look at the type of study as I'm doing this. Because as you know from these classes here at Tulane, your intervention studies are looked at differently than cross-sectional studies. So you really want to make sure that when you're looking at each article, you're weighing the type of study that it is. So what we're going to talk about, Philip and I are going to talk about today, is this matrix method, a way to organize all this madness for you. So we're going to talk about 4 things: how to create a paper trail so you have documentation of what you've been doing as you're searching the literature, how to keep all your stuff together in one section of documents, how to create a review matrix, a spreadsheet, and how to synthesize it. How do you put it all together so you actually make some sense out of what you've been learning? So a paper trail is some record or list of notes to keep track of what you've done as you complete the search, where you actually write out your keywords, your key sources, and what databases you use. I mean, physically writing them out so that every time that you take an hour and a half here on Tuesday and an hour and a half there on a Friday, you don't forget what you just did. How many times have you done this? You're like starting the same search all over again, and it's because you're using the same keywords, and you don't remember that you already did that. So you have to keep track of this for yourself. This might sound silly, but this is how I started out figuring this out. I did not keep track, and I was doing the same work over and over again. It was ridiculous. So for your keywords, you want to come up with words that really describe your topic. And when you read an article, they have keywords listed at the bottom of the article or at the abstract, and you'll start to become familiar in what keywords databases use, and you'll use those keywords over and over again. All right, so you'll try to come up with a list of those. You'll think of the key sources, any key reference books, journals, government documents. Remember, you really want to use peer-reviewed journals as much as possible. I don't think that, obviously, even in this world of social media, blogs, all that stuff, it's just not considered part of the evidence base at this point. Maybe that will change or something, I don't know. Government documents as much as possible. The other thing is if you're, depending on what the fields or what your interest area is, you might really think about looking beyond the typical public health databases. So for example, for my work, which is related to the built environment, a lot of my literature is in the transportation databases, which we don't necessarily house here at Tulane, so I have to go to UNO or kind of like steal them from other people and, from Transportation Research Board, or urban planning. So, there's a lot of intersections now of cross-disciplinary work in public health. So think about what other disciplines are interested in your area, and can you borrow some of their research to put in your literature review. So there's some of the basic bibliographic databases that Philip is going to talk more detailed about. And so you want to write down authors, which can be helpful in searching. When you're going to start seeing the same names all the time because people build careers in the field. So you want to keep track of, just have them in your notes so that you know that you might end up searching, well, what else has this person done? Because that might help you get further. So here are some of the sources that I mentioned. Conference proceedings are also really helpful. For example, in my research, Active Living Research has a giant database on their website. They do literature reviews in Active Living. So if you're interested in biking and walking at all, Active Living Research is a great place to begin because they do literature reviews on their own website. And you can search there by keywords and things like that. And they have staff that do this, so cut out a lot of work for you. But they also keep track of all their conferences and have all the presentations from their conferences listed on the site. So even if you didn't get a chance to go to San Diego last year, for you, right? I don't know. You can still find everything that people are presenting, and then they also have papers that people publish there too. So now Philip's going to talk more about how to refine your search.
One other thing to go back. For those who have the assignment coming up and still have no idea what they want to do, this is also a great place to start just to see what's out there. And that way I can find some ideas of what to do my topic on, what to do my searches on. If you have a strong desire to do any publishing in the near future, also find what's missing in the current literature and then try to expand your research into a gap and then go from there, and then who knows, you may have something in the journal pretty soon. So think about just if you have a basic topic, came on the news or whatever, Dr. Gupta said something that you had something of interest, and just go out and try to take it a little further. You may come across something just within data to try to figure out what's a problem, and then see what's been done within the literature. So just think about what we have available, not only within the library as well as the World Wide Web, or even just out of your advisors' brains and your colleagues here, your fellow students, just to see what I can possibly go into. Think about that. Oh, and as a side, we're talking about the matrix methods, and the author who's written that, Dr. Judith Garrard, we actually have the books, edition 1 and 2nd edition. So if there's anything beyond this seminar, we do have the materials for you in the library. They can be checked out for a month. I must admit, having done this just last year, it is weird because actually I did the seminar with the students and then went to Missouri and did my own review. And I can't tell you how valuable these books were. Particularly once Kate starts talking about the Excel spreadsheets and abstraction. So you might be married to this book for a while. But I'm not trying to intimidate you. All right, so once we have a topic, it's just going about trying to search the literature to see what's out there. And yes, you'll have various degrees of studies, whether it's qualitative and quantitative. You may have some things that are so new it's only been in conference materials and there hasn't been a lot done in the literature itself. So there's things that you'll discover. what I would like to emphasize, having helped a lot of you since the last seminar, as well as a lot of public health analysis folks here, is that some of us are great at choosing topics. But when you do a literature review, we have to watch how narrow we make that topic in initial searches. You want to make sure that you are broad enough to get everything as possible. Then, as you go through your reading and your analysis, and you start to apply your inclusion and exclusion criteria, then let you be the primary filter, not the computer database, okay? It's one thing to really, really understand here. And don't be intimidated, because, yes, you may come across a lot of materials. But the review I did, I started with 169 articles. But by the time I applied the criteria, I wound up with 23 for the actual review. And depends upon your topic area, that's a fact of life. So don't be afraid once you start seeing them piled up, because once you get through the titles, you'll be able to throw some out. Once you get through the abstract, you'll be able to throw some out. And then still maybe half of that you may actually have to read from the first page to the last. And then, of course, you may have some references that you might add to your document file as well. But try to keep that initial search as broad as possible, so that you can encompass as much of the literature as possible, because as you'll notice within the books, Dr. Gerard is always talking about owning the literature. So you want to make sure you have the general material as well as something specific that really applies to your topic. And it's the only way you're going to be able to do that, is to go as broad as possible. All right. So the few things you'll just, to go into some basic searching, is that you may have a topic, and you have keywords with that. And at the same time, just trying to go in and refine some things because you found that gap or where you want to be. So I want to maybe turn mine into more of a rural study. I want to turn mine in, since there's so much out there of cardiovascular diseases, maybe I'll just look at 20 years. So think about these things. Do I want to look at women, children, men, old people, geriatric, or if I want to go into nursing homes, churches, schools. You know, think about these things or where you want to do your study. And then from there, take that to the literature. So as I'm always saying when you see me, is that, you know, before you touch the keyboard, write it down. So that way you have some idea of what you're looking for, then that way, that'll help you determine where you need to go. And that will also help, should you come to the desk or call us or email us at the library, of how we can actually steer you in the direction also. So we can do this as a team. And so as you're searching, you're going to come across other terms that from the readings that will also assist you with your topic as well. So as you can go about just looking and trying to determine where I want to be with my literature. And for some of you, I've noticed that you have a general topic, but you kind of let the literature determine the final product. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Let the literature do that, because at the same time, you're putting more and more into your knowledge base as well. You'd be a great professor, or a good librarian too. So don't hesitate. So find those topics, find those places, the who's, the what's, the when, the where, and the hows, and that will help you greatly when it comes to doing searches on your own, or whether or not you need to seek assistance. So the more you know, the more we can help you out. And don't be afraid to put those terms, because the beauty of the electronic databases, the Medlines, the EBSCOs, and the OBITs, MBases, all that stuff, is that we can pick up those terms and titles and the abstracts. And the good databases, particularly the ones that we pay for, have those keywords and the descriptors that some of the authors may provide as well. So that entire record is searchable. So even if it's not in the title, that word that you put in, barrier, might be one of the keywords, even though it's not in the title of the abstract, because the author pulled out other words that may not necessarily be a part of the title per se. So just think about those things. Now, one thing that I did with the review last year, and just as a checkup kind of, to make sure. So I started very narrow and had the 169. But once I was down to about 39, I went ahead and redid the search with control vocabulary. And I don't have time to get into the control vocabulary. But there are official terms within these high-level databases, that this is what it should be called. At one time, healthcare disparities or inequity was actually called healthcare accessibility. That was the official term. And now disparities is an actual term because of so much literature out there. So there are times within PubMed and within the EBSCO databases that we can actually go in and find what's considered to be the term that everything else that will be synonymous can still apply to, but there is such a thing as finding the official term in the literature. And then that way, what you would really do is find, you should just replicate what you've done. But instead of finding 169, you might actually just find 13, because that's what going by a very, it's a very, I guess, a finite search when you're doing control vocabulary. But you should, just to make sure that you have some of the things that you're really interested in, then you can use the control vocabulary to find those articles. But you should actually have them already anyway. But it's just a good way to just check yourself to make sure that you have some of the key materials that you need. Okay? So, just quickly, what you're going to do, I know some of you have seen this hundreds of times with me or my colleagues, but I just want to point out that two basic ways of searching within the library databases. And you can also do this with Google, but Google will already do your combinations for you with the ands and ors and the nots. So the default in Google is actually and. But there's a basic search, what we call a Boolean search, where we put in combining terms, and or not. So and to combine topics, or to expand the search. So if you have anything that's synonymous, like personnel and employees, staff, workforce. So those are kind of the same thing, but it depends on how it's used within the literature. You can actually have that together. You can put disparities or inequality as an or term. You can do that as well. Prenatal or pregnant. You can do that. So that just kind of expands the terms and catches as many keywords that are out there as possible. There's not, just in case you wanted to exclude a particular term. So if you were looking at physical activity and but maybe not, you want to try to exclude all the elderly people. Or if you were looking at physical activity and trying to make sure that you want to reduce, let's say you have a program or you're looking for programs out there where they have tried to increase activity, but at the same time you've noticed that what they want to do is maybe increase activity to reduce injuries. But you want to see whether or not within the literature if we can reduce the injuries without drugs. So we can try to eliminate anything that's mentioned drugs or pharmaceuticals. We want to see if Tai Chi is helping to reduce repetitive stress injuries as opposed to Advil. So we can kind of exclude things at the same time. So this is what you would do in PubMed, is that you would create a search string so that have your terms, has your connectors, and also have, and that's what's here, I have snacking or eating while children are watching TV, how that's affecting their activity. Any questions? So, and or not, basic connector terms. Another database, the EBSCO database, which we use heavily over here in public health, is a guided type search. So they actually give you the connectors. So I and or not over here, I just select which one I want. I can combine if I want to, so I put my or for programs or interventions. And once again, I'm looking for physical activity and barriers. Now the great thing about this, and this is not something I would recommend on the initial search, is that with guided searches, I can tell the search engine where I want my terms. What I did was I said I want physical activity in the title. Now that would eliminate a lot of stuff with physical activity. It could be in abstract, it could be in the keywords and descriptors as well. So it's not something you want to do from the start, okay? You want to keep it broad. But this came to the point just to show you the options that are available. And this is a way that you would be able to check as well to make sure that you cover as much as possible so that you haven't missed that key cross-sectional study or that key randomized trial, stuff like that. So I told it I would take one physical activity in the title, but I have my other terms in all text. So that way it would search to see if it's an abstract. It'll search keywords listed by author. It'll search the descriptors and subject headings that the database indexers gave us to. So you can search all of that stuff. So So these terms may not necessarily be in the title, but somehow within that record, it's also listed for me to come up. And once you have these results, then you take that criteria, as we're going to get to in a second, and bring it down to where you need to be for final analysis. All right, so once we have all this stuff, as I mentioned, we had no problem. So the documents section here is where you try to organize all of this material. And as I mentioned, I started with 169. All I did was throw them in a citation manager, which we discussed heavily around here. We just did in the web last week, we're doing in the web again this Friday, reference Monday. So I think you all have the schedules and we need to get those in the elevators. But the great thing is that all these databases just go ahead and put it in a manager. And what I like about the managers is that I can organize them. So even though I started with the 169, then applied my own filters to it, and I came up with about 39. So I just created a subgroup of the 169. So I don't need to try to find those through the big group anymore. So I need to go through these 39 again. That's all I want to look through, because that's all I need. So I finally wound up with 23. So I had 3 folders, the big one, the subgroup, and the final one, because all I needed to do was look through the 23 to create my spreadsheet and also for my discussion. So it's just a great way to take the chaos and put it in a nice little ball. Like that, did you read a commercial? The guy is carrying a big thing of the green fluid and he takes it down to a little ball. That's all it is. That's what it is. Or like George Jetson, when he used to have his car and he put his car in his pocket. You remember those? No. All right, showing my age. All right, so I can organize them to have them in one spot. I can also use the advantages to do the writing of the paper as well. Put them in by years, which will help you put them in by authors if you prefer to do it alphabetically. Normally it's advised that you do it by years, so that way you have some idea of how the literature has changed over time. But that's, to each his own. And lastly, as mentioned, we do provide the reference citation manager in the web citation manager. If you don't have an account by now, just try to attend some of the classes, whether it's Baptist classes or here at 1202 on Wednesdays. That schedule should be coming out. I apologize for some of the delays we've had with that. But we do provide those two for you all. If you can, if you feel you'll be doing a lot of research in the future, you want to purchase the EndNote desktop version, which once you have EndNote, you actually automatically have it in the web account too. And it will help you greatly with just anything, whether you're just a practitioner or if you get into teaching. These will help you greatly. Ref Manager is also out there. Actually, it's like people make EndNote, make Ref Manager. It's not as flexible. I think Ref Manager is only PC, whereas EndNote is PC Mac. And there's also Zotero, which is a Firefox extension that you could get for free. Now, I would say that it's not the greatest. It's good, and I find that it works very well with PubMed. But once we get into some of the library databases, I've had issues. I've also had many issues with Zotero because I have all 3 of these on my computer as well, because I have to know these things. So so RefWorks in the web and Zotero, they tried to fight it out a few times. So Zotero had to go. So big deal. And for the PC folks, Microsoft Word 2007 and 2010 does have a reference tab, but you have to input all of those references manually in order to cite them. So in the meantime, take the 2 that we provide for you, get to know them well, and actually RefWorks you can take really after graduation. And that will help you greatly in this process. I promise you. I'm going to turn it over to abstract.
So as you're creating that document section, make sure when you find an article that you like that Philip explained to you how to get one, now you need to figure out, well, do you read the whole article? No, don't read the whole article right away. Just review the abstract. You can skim it. I always read the results first, and then if I like the results, then I read the methods, and then I'll read the discussion. And then if I have time and I feel like listening more, I'll read the introduction. But really you want to prioritize the parts of the article that are most important to you. So that's where you want to start. You know, you can skim the whole thing if you have more time, as I said, but you know, the abstract with the results is the first place to go. And then you're concerned with the methods. So download or photocopy the article or keep it somewhere. You know, having it in EndNote is perfect because then it's an electronic version. You always know where it is. It's categorized easily. So now you have some of these articles. They're all in your EndNote file. And now you want to know what to do with them. You've looked at them and they've made into your criteria. You know that they're important enough, that they meet your keywords, they're relevant, you skim them because they're interesting and they've made sense. So you want to organize them from oldest to newest by year of your publication. And you want to set this up electronically, as I explained. And you're going to read each abstract one at a time and put those notes in a matrix. And so a matrix really is kind of like a spreadsheet. So there's one example, but I also wanted to give you another example. So when you set up your spreadsheet, this is a spreadsheet that I had set up for my bike lane study. So I like Excel because I have everything in one place, and I can make the columns as big or as small as I want. So, for example, the first column always has the same three things. It has the author, the title, and the location of the journal. So, for example, this is the author, there's the title, and then if you move the bar, you can see the full journal. So that's in every single one. So you want to have, every row has its own journal article or document, and every column is the topics that you want to abstract from that, what you want to get out of that article. So the first column, as I said, always the author, the title, and the name of the journal. The second column, the year of publication, so that you can sort these or limit easily, or just look, or look for things that are more recent or earlier if you want. And the third column, your purpose of the paper or the document. What's the research question that they were answering? These are the three things that should always be the same for every time you do this kind of review, any review. And then other column topics you can change. You can do whatever you want. You can add some things. So for example, skip this for a second. So here's an example where we have an author, the title of the journal, we have a year, we have a purpose. Let's say I'm also really interested in study design. I really want to have an idea of what kind of study this is and keep track of that. Because what if I find out there's a bunch of cross-sectional studies on a topic but no intervention studies? So then maybe I want to keep track of variables. What are people actually measuring? And do you know what they are? So that you can really know, okay, in our field, we've seen a lot of people who count physical activity by manual observation. Are there people who are counting physical activity with automatic counters in a more effective way, for example? So you might be able to try to find that. So some are interested in the data sources, and then you can have some comments that you write that have that tell you like what the main thrust of the article was, or you can maybe say that could be a place for if you say this is a really weak study. Low sample size, barely significant p-values, things that you might want to throw in there in the comments. So there's other column topics I said. You want maybe study design, sources, sample size, the effect. Did they make a big difference, or is it just a tiny little change that's not really going to make a big deal? And the big scheme in public health. And you might want to leave some column topics blank because you might see something that comes up over and over again that you didn't anticipate. So maybe you want to throw that in there as you're reading some more articles. So as you're reading these papers, I know that a lot of you in EPI probably talked about how to read a paper. And when you really get down into some of the ones that you're looking at that you've decided to include, make sure that you really think about what the purpose was. Did they answer their own research question? Just because something's out in the peer-reviewed literature doesn't always mean it's perfect. We're the best thing out there. So there's a lot of people who think, just like you, who might have made a mistake in accepting this paper. Or, there's a publication bias that you've talked about in your classes. So think really carefully about what this paper contributes. Think about the sample size. How is this data collected? Think about how data could be collected. Is this the best way that they picked? I mean, we all know that things are limited in terms of funding sometimes. You don't have all the money in the world to go out and craft the most perfect study, but start with what you can. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of their discussion? Do they actually highlight what the limitations of their study were? Or do they just say that everything is fantastic? And look at their references and see if you want to add some of their references to your documents list. And also make sure that they didn't miss anybody that you found that's kind of obvious in the field. We don't want to have, you don't want to look at their paper and say, oh, they clearly missed this body of research related to obesity, when you're looking at that. So from doing this, you can learn who the researchers are, you learn who the big names are, you learn where the research is done, like centers, other prevention research centers if you're in this work, cities, data sets that people always are using together, funding sources. At the end of every paper, there's an acknowledgement section that says who funded their work. That is very helpful for you to keep track of so that you know who to apply to for funding later on. I would start to learn those granting agencies. And then you get the basic references that everybody cites, right? Like JAMA for obesity, it's legal, right? So you just know those. So then after you do this, you're going to come up with this, you're going to do some synthesis, right? You pulled it all together, you need to think a little bit more. One more thing I want to say on this. When you learn who the researchers are, this is so you can go bother them. When you're at a conference, when you're at APHA, go to their stuff, find out who they are, go talk to them, go stand by their poster, go ask them questions. Just because they're published doesn't mean they don't want to talk to you. And this is the best way for you to network and make contacts in the field, is to engage. And I send researchers emails all the time. I read your paper, I'm interested in this, can you tell me more about this data set? Are you interested in working together on another study? And they want people to contact them. Yeah.
And also, if part of your documents happens to be a conference proceeding, check with that person to see if there's any more data, if it's going out to publishing, if there's an expanded manuscript coming, because it might benefit you as well.
So now you're at the synthesis step. So you've done a lot of work, and it's very time-consuming up to this point. And now you know a lot. You have a headache, and there's a lot swimming in your brain. But luckily, you can step back and go have a drink or something, or go run, do something more healthy. And then you come back, and then you're ready to write about it. So that's when the synthesis part comes into play. And you're going to really look at the analysis of this literature on a topic, and come up with some similarities and differences in what they're doing and what the authors have been doing, the research that's out there. And you want to look for what's missing. So, for example, in this literature review, is there a way to make just this bigger? No. I don't think I just. All right, so I have these studies in order. Most of them, there's one or two that are out of order. We have the title, and I have the type of design. So, and then I have some results. So for my study design for this small body, what do you guys notice here? They're what? Mostly what? Mostly cross-sectional, right? Not a lot of before and after studies, which when you're doing, this is a literature review about bicycling infrastructure in urban areas and the impact of new infrastructure on physical activity. So there's really very few, only one, or maybe two, and that one was published in 1999 in Portland by the Department of Transportation. So in the academic literature base, very little. So I know I hit a gold mine if I can figure out how to do before and after study, right? If I can't, then wrong. So what you want to do is make sure you can find the gaps. So there's a huge gap. And then, if I'm looking at this across, figure out, well, what are some of the things that people are doing? Some people are focused on shared lanes. Some people are focused on injuries. Some people are focused on why one group cycles more than another. So all of those things are important to me as I'm coming up with really understanding this whole body of literature. So if I'm looking at doing a study on the impact of bike lanes before and after, it's important for me to know, one, what's already been done on one bike lane in San Francisco, and what the problems were with that study and how I can fix it. And then two, what are other people interested in seeing in the literature? So this helps me get there. So it highlights what's missing, and you want to really analyze this and write a synthesis. So you've got your review matrix, that's what you really need, and you want to think about that underlying factors that might vary over time between all these studies. You know, why haven't there been more before and after studies? Why might that be? Why not?
They're expensive.
They're expensive.
They're time consuming.
Time consuming. What do you need to have a before and after study?
An intervention?
An intervention,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
You need something to have happened.
Yeah.
And you need to know when it's happening beforehand, right? And you have to be able to have the money and the people to go out and measure that before and after. So that's why it's so hard to do it. Natural experiments or any experiments in the built environment are very hard to do because of that issue. So that's a real big factor. So you have your document section, pull that together in your synthesis to help you remember those articles. So you're going to define your purpose when you write your literature review. What are you doing? This is in your introduction. What is the purpose of this review? What are you looking for? Describe how you looked at the search. You don't want to, because if you get your review published, and people publish reviews all the time, you know, people like to see this. It's like the state of the literature today, and that way someone else doesn't have to go do this later. So reviews are a publishable thing. So you have to describe your search process so that it makes sense and is justifiable. You want to discuss the issues, why you're doing the research, the method, what study designs you looked at, what your inclusion and exclusion criteria were, what some of the major findings were, and if there was missing or inadequate topics, what hasn't been covered adequately. You know, I mean, if you only have one study that has this big, grand statement about the impact of something, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's replicable or that that's going to happen somewhere else. So you look for a body of work that says that something is true. So you want to really look at those and think about the strength of the evidence base altogether. So you're going to look at that review matrix, you're going to read those columns from top to bottom and look for the themes. Are there things that appear and reappear? You know, is there during a certain time period where people are more focused on crashes in biking, for example? Why? Have authors done their own reviews well? As I said, you want to look at what they've missed. Do studies build on each other, or do they just go off in tangents and it's not very organized? That's an important thing to think about. Is the knowledge base growing? So does it develop with risk factors and interventions, or is it still just cross-sectional? You know, you really want to see something building. And that will help you understand what holes and opportunities exist, not just for publishing, but for your career, and also just adding to the body of knowledge. Because the worst thing to see is lots of intervention money going towards things that don't work. It's a waste of money. In our fiscal climate, we don't want to waste any money because we already have good ideas. We don't want to waste them on bad ones. You want to update this. So you wrote your review. NIH takes like a year to make a decision on anything, right? So now what, right? They give you the money, yay! But then what do? So have things changed? A bunch of studies may have been published. You know, you might have 6 to 10 in a year. So you really want to make sure that you're on top of that. And you can use Medline and EndNote to manage that for you. Philip, do you want to comment about how to set up the search, the notification system?
Yeah. So staying on top of the literature is very easy with the major databases.
Nope.
All you need to do within PubMed, and when we do the PubMed session for lunchtime, we show you how to do this. But you'll be able to set up an account. And then that way, every time something new comes out, you can do two things with it. You can save your search and then either log into PubMed and then tell it to run your search. It'll give you the most current search. But of course, I'd say 99% of people around here just tell PubMed every time something new comes out, email it. So it'll email you weekly, it'll email you monthly, it'll even email you if there's nothing new out, so at least you know that as well. It'll still email you just saying that there's 0 results this month. Simple as that. But all of the databases we have, you set up an account and it'll do that for you quickly and easily. And then from that way, if something new comes in, take it and dump it into your manager. And then that way you have, and of course, you may want to create a group or folder that has been post-grant accepted. So, something like that, so that you know how things have changed once you've received the money. And I've had experiences with faculty who have had that 1 year wait to see if we're going to get the money period, but after about 9 months, what happens is that they actually sent them an email wanting to know what was current before they even started looking at it. Just because they've waited for so long, they still want to make sure that here it is 9 months later, well, we're about to get to it, but we want you to do another search to make sure that nothing much has changed.
Yeah. So that's what we have for you all today. Are there any questions? Yes.
Have you ever considered just, like, while you're in EndNotes, you're importing most of these references anyway, you can just set up your preferences so that you have these matrix fields, and then, you can even customize the research notes to the notes fields to be the design of the study or whatnot, right?
Right.
And that way, essentially, you have your matrix and you don't have to compile anything, you just have to change a couple of the...
Yeah,
Do that with EndNote.
Right.
You won't be able to do it with web versions.
Right, you can customize EndNote to have all different fields that you're interested in for sure. But I think there's, I don't know. And the way part of learning in graduate school is learning how you learn. So I learn best when I really read something and I either have to talk about it or write it down or I have to digest it out in some way. So creating a matrix for me helps me digest it out. And so whatever way that you can do that best is great.
But it sounds like, what you're proposing would be great for pulling it all together.
Yeah.
But then you still have to process it so that
Right.
you have actually read the paper, and maybe so you have 2 spreadsheets, so you're more copying, pasting, and adding to what you've learned.
Right.
But this is a way to assemble it so
Yeah.
that you're not...
Well, essentially, it's the same thing, because you are going to be looking at these articles regardless of how you do it. But this way, you just don't have to sit down and compile the whole matrix, right? It's there for you already.
Yeah, that can be done.
How do we access EndNote?
Well, in the web, as well as RefWorks, you can get from the library website. Web up.
Yeah.
The library website is a place to mouse over help as well as my accounts. And you'll be able to get to EndNote Web or RefWorks. You create an account, and then from there, you're good to go with uploading and your citing portion. One thing that I discovered during the latter part of the session is that I know for many of your classes, they may just want you to put in your keywords used and the databases used, if you did limit anything to languages and years. But be aware, should you ever take that out to publication, is that many publications want you to actually put in your search combinations. And I know Cochrane does that for everything, for their systematic reviews, but I've seen it in a few journals as well. So remember your ands and your ors, whether or not you use the mesh terms or if you use the keyword terms. So just be aware of that sometimes also. And the best thing to do is that you can go into the search fields as I showed you with PubMed and just copy that search string. If you're in the EBSCOs with the guided databases, Microsoft, go ahead and just snag it or snip it with the new Windows 7, and just that way you have everything saved with I know with Embase, you can send your search history. With Ovid, you can send your search history to yourself. But make sure as you search that you document those search terms, and just be aware that you may need those strategies too. So, but you can easily, in the Mac folks, just Command Shift 4 and grab that search box. Simple as that.
Other questions?